All right. Well, let's get on with the presentation here. So my name is Jennifer Fale Papalangi, and it is my pleasure to serve this evening in sharing what I feel is very valuable information. Information I wish I knew earlier in life. A little bit about me. I've worked in the medical field for about 20 years. And after working 10 to 12 hours a day, I found myself living paycheck to paycheck. The more I earned, the more I spent. I just couldn't figure out how to get ahead financially. I struggled to provide for my children, but now that they are grown, I decided it was time for me to make up some of the time that I missed out when they were younger, and then be available for grandchildren when they come into the picture. So, not continuing to live that lifestyle, but taking back some of my time. And I know this story is not mine alone. An estimated 70% of Americans are in the same boat, and this plague does not discriminate. So let's take a look at some professional athletes really quick before we get started on this. According to the 2009 Sports Illustrated article, 78% of NFL players are either bankrupt or under financial stress within 2 years of retirement. And an estimated 60% of NBA players go bankrupt within 5 years. Um, as an example, my kids, my boys, they're big Seattle Seahawks fans, and they've been following, Adrian Peterson for a long time. He used to be with the Minnesota Vikings and the New Orleans Saints and the Washington Redskins before becoming a Seattle Seahawk. And during this time, he earned over $100 million in his career, but he mismanaged his wealth. He lived lavishly, made poor investments, and ultimately it led to his bankruptcy after a Houston judge ordered that his assets be seized in 2024. And I can name off several other professional athletes like Cheryl Swoops or Dennis Rodman. Again, very, very lucrative careers, but lost it all because of poor investment, failed business ventures, and extravagant lifestyle choices, reckless spending, etc. And it's not just professional athletes. Some of the other groups that we consider wealthy, like actors and actresses, they too make poor investment choices and spend recklessly. As an example, Kim Basinger, she purchased an entire town in Brazelton, Georgia. And when that failed to materialize into the tourist attraction that she wanted it to be, um, she had to ultimately sell off parcels of this town until she sold it all off. Again, Will Smith. Will Smith, we're all familiar with Will Smith. Lavish purchases, didn't set aside funds for taxes, and ultimately ended up losing a lot of his money in that way. So again, groups that most of us would consider wealthy, they struggle the same as the rest of us. And the commonality is widespread. Most Americans do not understand how money works. Put an 8 in the chat if you agree with that statement. So, childhood story. I grew up in your typical middle working class family. We had enough to live well and take vacations. As far as I knew, we were doing great financially. I was encouraged to go to school, get good grades, etc. Um, but when I start thinking back on it, I was being brainwashed. I was being taught the poverty language, which is the slide we're looking at now. The left-hand side, which says, go to school, get good grades, get a good job. When you find a good job, keep it. Money is the root of all evil. The rich are robbing the poor. Um, Money doesn't buy happiness. They don't pay much. The rich should pay more taxes. Things have gotten really expensive. Those ideas were the staple in my childhood. I wish I had been taught the other side of this slide, which was the wealth language. Um, Go to school, get good grades, start a business. A good job is a place to start, but it's not a good place to finish. It's called the corporate ladder, not the corporate bed. Money isn't everything, but it ranks right up there with oxygen. Money is best exchanged for experiences, not things. Don't work for money, teach your money to work for you. So, what's the difference between these two languages? It's mindset. So, according to this slide here, you're either mastering money or money is mastering you. And I personally would love to master my money rather than have it master me. So this famous Tony Robbins quote is basically saying financial control is a choice, and without it, money is going to tell you what you can and cannot do. And if in order to um, shift your mindset from being a consumer in the economy to becoming an owner, you have to become an investor. So how do we do this? Well, let's first talk about what is wealth. So how many of you heard of the phrase money doesn't grow on trees? I think we've all kind of heard that. Well, funny story about my childhood is we had a tree in the backyard, very common in Hawaii, called the Pliomele hawaiiensis. And as a child, we used it and its leaves as play currency. And if it were that easy for us to have money, it would be fantastic. But that is not how it works out, right? So, symbolically speaking, money does grow on trees. And as Mr. Suni Samad states here, when you realize money itself is the seed and the harvest, you can therefore grow money on trees. So, what is the wealth formula? Anybody understand the slide that's in front of us? The wealth formula is an actual formula. And this is how you're going to cultivate your money tree. Why is this important? I personally cannot work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I would be sick and I would definitely be complaining because I need some time to myself, some relaxation. So if the typical person works a 40-hour work week and works for about 40 years of their lifetime with an average salary of about $50,000 a year, that would be $2 million. But what if you had an exemplary employee like Andrew Jackson or like Benjamin Franklin, who can work 24/7, 365 without calling in sick, without complaining? It would be possible to make that $2 million in considerably less time. So, which would you find more valuable? $2 million earned over 40 years or $2 million earned in, say, half that time, 20 years? And the way that we do this is with this wealth formula. So time plus capital plus rate of return minus inflation minus taxes equals wealth. So let's look into this a little bit further here. Time builds wealth, allowing your money enough time for the interest to compound and build up your wealth. So in this example here that we're going to go over, I'm going to introduce you to two friends of mine, Mr. Start Early and Mr. Start Late. Both of my friends are 25 years young. They're working great jobs and they have about $1,000 a month in disposable income. After learning about the wealth formula, Mr. Start Early decides he's ready now to cultivate his money tree. He starts saving $300 a month or $3,600 a year in a vehicle that's earning 8% interest. His $3,600 are the seeds, and the 8% interest is the soil. So in year one, he's put his 3,600, year two, year three, etc. Mr. Start Late hasn't even started yet. He's kind of questioning himself. So, but you can see now, by the time we reach year 7, Mr. Start Early has invested a significant amount of money, but he's no longer going to invest anymore. At this time, both of them run into each other again, Mr. Start Early and Mr. Start Late. And Mr. Start Late says, "Hey, are you still doing that thing where you're saving money?" And Mr. Start Early says, "Well, yeah, sorta." And so he again explains this concept of the wealth formula. And lo and behold, Mr. Start Late finally understands. So he starts saving and growing his money tree. So at age 32, he starts investing his $3,600 a year. And as you can see, he's investing $3,600 until he is 48, before he has the same amount of money that Mr. Start Early, who stopped investing. Remember, he stopped investing. Let's go back to that screen. He stopped investing at age 31. That was the last time he put money in, but his money continued to grow to the point where at age 48, they both had about $130,000. The difference here is because Mr. Start Early started early, he only invested $25,200 in total. Mr. Start Late had to contribute $61,200 in order for them to both have $130,000 at age 48. So Mr. Start Early, understanding that wealth formula, and through the power of leveraging time and compound interest, his seeds continued to multiply without having to supplement them. So let's talk a little bit about the rate of return. The quality of your soil determines the quantity of your harvest. So the rule of 72, anybody know about the rule of 72? So the rule of 72 states that the amount received on an investment over a specific period of time, that's your rate of return. But the rule of 72 is any interest rate divided by 72 is going to determine how long it takes for your principal to double. So why is this important? The average American is retiring on a 401k or a 403b with around $87,000. Why, do you ask? Because at some point in our 20s, maybe late 20s, early 30s, we get into some kind of financial emergency and we end up borrowing from our 401k. The first time we borrow, it's a sincere need. We needed this, or else we weren't going to get to the next stage in our life, right? So the next time a financial emergency comes up, it's so much easier to dip back into that 401k and borrow again. The problem is it becomes a habit, and before you know it, our retirement fund becomes an emergency fund, and therefore it leaves us little or no money for retirement. So we have to be intentional on our wealth journey. So in this example on this slide here, we've got 4 29-year-olds with $10,000 to invest at varying soil quantities or interest rates, as you may have it. So at 1% interest, according to the rule of 72, it's going to take 72 years for that $10,000 to double to $20,000. However, if we have our second 29-year-old investing in a 4% soil, their money is going to double every 18 years, as you can see here. 29, they invest their 10,000. At 47, they have 20,000, and at 65, they had 40,000. Now, if they are investing, like individual number 3, in a soil that is 8%, their money is going to double every 9 years. So that when they hit age 65, they will have approximately $160,000. And it's doubled every 9 years from the time they invested it. Now, if we all could be like individual number 4 and invest our money in a 10% soil, our money is going to double every 7.2 years. So by the time we reach 65, we will have $320,000. So would you prefer to plant your money in a low quality soil or a high quality soil? I think we can all be in agreement that we want that high quality soil. So how do we do that? This is how banks do it. So if we start looking at cash value life insurance, right? Bank owned life insurance. A lot of us were told when we were in our young adulthood, open an interest bearing checking account and an interest bearing savings account. If that was you, put a Nate in the chat because that was definitely me. Um, I was told it was a safe place to grow my money. So I did that. And I saw a small little increase to my money every year with every, statement. Well, this is what the banks did with our money. They had bank-owned life insurance. They are essentially taking our money, investing it, and making a profit. And in return, they give us this tiny little share, typically 0.02%. Do you know what the average interest rate on a cash value life insurance policy has been over the last 20 years? It's averaged between 8 and 10%. So if a bank is getting 8 to 10% on, say, 24 billion, like Bank of America here, why are they only giving us 0.02%? Because they're making a lot of money. Same with Wells Fargo. They're investing in $19 billion of bank-owned life insurance. JP Morgan, 12 billion. PNC, 10 billion. Truist, 7 billion. When you really think about how much money they're making on our money, collectively speaking, that's how they're investing in these bank-owned life insurance policies. Yet they're only giving us a little bit of money. So, in order to understand how our money grows, we need to talk a little bit about fixed rates, variable, and indexed. For a fixed rate, this is typically what you're going to see in your low risk savings account, CDs, and they're very predictable and safe. You're going to see a slow but steady growth. Then you have your variable growth. This is going to be, think the stock market. There's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, there's high potential for loss. As an example, if I have $1,000 in the stock market and I lose 10%, I've lost $100. I still have $900. It's still, a reasonable amount of money. However, if the stock market then goes back up by 10%, I only regain $90. So I'm still shy $10 from the original 1,000 I started with. So it's something you can do, but higher risk, higher returns, yet higher risk. And then you have something called the index strategy. This is a great way to go. It's a very balanced approach, right? As an example, when the stock market goes up, my money goes up. When the stock market goes down, I do not lose a penny. And that's because my money is not really participating in the stock market. It only mimics the market. So if I invest in an index strategy today, we're going to look back retroactively at what the market did exactly 1 year from now. So if the market did 10%, I get an interest credit that accounts for those gains. In the event that the market goes down below zero, I lose nothing, but I also gain nothing. And this is what we typically call zero is my hero or zero floor. Very low risk, medium risk area to be in. So if the best time was to plant a tree was 20 years ago, the second best time is right now. So in order to understand all of these concepts, we have to understand inflation, right? So inflation, are prices going up or is the value of your dollar going down? What causes the value of a dollar to decrease? So you've got high inflation, right? Reduced purchasing power. So the price of goods and services rise. Each dollar buys fewer items and ultimately results in a lowering of its value. We've got increased money supply, where the Federal Reserve increases the money supply faster than the economy is growing, and that results in a weaker currency. We've got low interest rates, right? Reduced investment demand. Global investors may move their money to other currencies offering higher yields, and that subsequently decreases demand for the dollar. We've got large trade and budget deficits, importing more than we're exporting. That puts a downward pressure on the dollar's value. How about geopolitical and policy uncertainty? We should be very familiar with this. This has happened a lot already this year, with Trump having imposed some very aggressive tariffs. That can slow growth and lead investors to reassess the overall outlook of the economy, and that causes the dollar to decline. What about institutional stability? Threats to the independence of the Federal Reserve, or risks of government shutdowns that can undermine global confidence. Again, something we're very familiar with, right? We've had several government shutdowns this year, and that weakens the dollar's status. So for the last 10 years, the inflation rate has been 2.91%. The value of your dollar decreases annually on average 3%. So unless your money is growing at a rate that supersedes the inflation rate, you're losing money. It's unfortunate. So we also need to understand how our money is taxed, right? As part of this formula. We've got our after-taxed money with tax-deferred growth. Mutual funds, CDs, savings. This is our tax now bucket, right? We've got our tax later bucket. 401ks, IRAs, annuities, 403bs. So before tax money, and then it's taxed upon withdrawal. You've also got your tax never bucket. This is where we want to strive to be. This is where we're going to have our Roth IRA and our life insurance, right? We use after-tax money and it grows tax-free. So when we look at all of these ways that our money is taxed, and knowing that our taxes are going to continue to decrease or increase as time goes by, we definitely want to be in this tax never bucket. Ooh. So the wealth formula strategy is your greatest asset is your ability to produce an income, right? So how do I protect my income from all the what ifs? What if I pass away tomorrow? What if I become critically ill and I can no longer produce income? Or what if I lived an extremely healthy life and I outlived my ability to produce income? Well, life insurance as an investment tool. Yep, by utilizing an index universal life product. And we're going to talk about that here on the next screen. So this is a true example of a index universal life product. Remember the wealth formula: time plus capital plus rate of return minus inflation minus taxes equals wealth. So in this example here, we are utilizing a 20-year funding period. That's the time portion of our formula. Our capital is the 156.65 a month. The rate of return, as we discussed before, is 6.42% to 15.88%, right? Because the average rate of return over the last 20 years has been approximately 15% average. And then we're going to invest it in a tax advantage growth. So that last bucket on the previous slide. Inflation, because this rate of return supersedes the current inflation rate of 2.91%, we're going to grow our money. So the key things to keep in mind here is the tax advantage growth, according to IRS tax code 7702, money growing in the stock market that is attached to a genuine life insurance contract can't be classified as gross income and therefore cannot be taxed. So important thing. Unlike your 401k, a loan against your money void of taxes and penalties. So that's an important part to remember as well. And then, like I said, our rate of return, 15% average, you can't beat that. So the wealth formula strategy, we also have to understand all of these other factors, right? Compounding interest, point-to-point indexing, and only participating in the gains, never the losses, right? So when we look at this, although we are no longer investing active income, the cash value continues to grow no matter what. You can see it in the illustration here. So let's understand compound interest. Compound interest is the interest earned on both the initial principal amount and the accumulated interest from previous periods. This effectively allows you to earn interest on interest. It is what causes savings and investments to grow at an accelerating rate over time rather than in a straight line. Point-to-point indexing is a fixed index annuity strategy, and it calculates interest based solely on the percentage change of an index, for example, the S&P 500. And it's usually between two specific dates, usually the start and end of a contract year. It ignores all the interim volatility and it caps gains while providing a zero floor to protect against market losses. So once again, zero floor or zero is my hero. So again, although we are no longer investing active income, we're still growing our money. All right. How many of you were around in 2008 and 2020 and happened to partake in some of the big events that happened in these times, like the housing market crash? I was definitely there. I'm sure a lot of you were there as well. So in 2008, I actually was a real estate agent at that time, and I witnessed firsthand the devastating effects of this market crash, which was triggered by the bursting of a massive housing bubble. Fueled by subprime mortgage lending, loose credit standards, and very complex financial products. So, as adjustable rate mortgages reset higher and home prices fell, massive defaults led to a foreclosure crisis. Banks failed, and they called it the Great Recession because it resulted in over $2 trillion in global economic loss. I watched a lot of my friends, they suffered financial hardships, and some of them endured long legal battles because they got tied up in that subprime lending and loose credit standards. And then, of course, in 2020, we've all been there. We've experienced COVID-19, severe global recession with the US GDP losses projected between 3.2 and 4.8 trillion dollars over 2 years' time. And the key impacts included sharp rises in unemployment, massive supply chain disruptions, and intense inflationary pressures. And this disproportionately affected a lot of lower income workers, women, small businesses, while increasing overall global poverty for the first time in a generation. So when you start looking at this strategy here, you can see where that is reflected in, say, something like an index universal life product. You had zero floor, zero is my hero, so you didn't lose any money even though the market lost money. Same in 2020 to 2022, you can see that the market lost at 15.6%, but the indexed product did not lose anything. So it's a safer way to put your money in a vehicle that's going to continue growing but not lose any funds. So that is kind of wrapping up where we're at as far as the wealth formula. So who is qualified to work with us? Well, since we are professional, licensed financial individuals, we're qualified to work with anyone. We can customize a strategy that works for you, And we like to meet with our clients at least every 6 months to guide and coach them to their financial goals, whatever that may be. So our next steps today is reach out to the person who invited you and thank them. Let them know if you're interested in becoming a client and or interested in the business opportunity that OIC presents. And always refer a friend. Don't keep this secret to yourself. Invite them to this presentation. Invite them to one of our other business opportunities. With that being said, I wish you all the most wonderful evening, and we'll see you on the next round. Bye, everyone.